and welcome to. And this is by the way, before we go into this, there's a fascinating story before we start the podcast. But hi, I'm Cuddy Cudworth, the UK's leading mind management coach, self-titled. By the way, Simon, self-titled. In case anyone's watching the podcast and going, but his name's Max. No, it's Simon, and we can explain why before once we get into it. So this is the Mind Management Mentors podcast. I'm Cuddy Cudworth. We like to talk about workplace wellness, what workplace wellness is, why a massive part of return on investment is going to be creating the right culture, and a big part of that culture creation is definitely going to be HR. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself, tell everybody what you do, as if you were on blind date, and then we will unravel the story of how this podcast came around, because I think this is kismet, if kismet is a positive thing. But this is fantastic. Tell everybody what you do, your name, and where you're from.
Thanks, Cuddy. My name is Simon Coulson. I am a director of human resources. Well, I was director of human resources for a luxury 5-star hotel in central London up until recently. I've taken a little break and I'm now looking for my next adventure. I have worked in hospitality, good Lord, for about 25 years. I did, like so many people in hospitality, I was a student, I needed beer money, so I went to work in a restaurant and I fell in love with it. I did about 10, 11 years in restaurant operations, so managing restaurants and nightclubs and so forth. And then I moved into recruitment because I loved hospitality, but I was a bit sick of the hours. And then, from there, I moved into the HR space. I've been part of HR teams now for about 14 years. Prior to Cafe Royal, I was at Corinthia Hotel London, and it's a pleasure to be here talking to you today.
Thank you very much, Simon. That was very professional, by the way.
Wasn't it just?
That was very professional. Now, if anybody's watched the podcast, I'm a big believer in put sometimes that professionalism shite to the side and let's just be us in the moment, because this is genuinely the power of authenticity. So before we go into, because it's a great subject we're talking about, I would like to tell everybody how this podcast has come about and how the world has a real fantastic way of, or the universe has a fantastic way of going, you two need to meet. So I get a lot of my podcast guests by basically going through LinkedIn and going, right, this person looks like what's presented on LinkedIn is something that's going to be valuable to the world, especially in mind management and the workplace wellness space. And I just dropped on, something popped up on my feed. I'm like, right, this gentleman is a HR manager. I know that's going to be a great connection for me. So I messaged you saying, hi, would you like to come on the podcast, be a guest? I think this is good content for you, Simon. That was 2-3 weeks ago. You went away on holiday, I think. He said, oh, sorry, I didn't get back in contact. Not a problem. I know things take time. We've jumped on the call today. And you're like, oh, hey, Cuddy, how you doing? Long time no see. And I'm like, who are you? I don't know you. So you, and this is just, I was like, how does he know me? So you were a guest in a pub that I worked in 18 years ago, because I used to do, and I still do it the weekends, actually. I do like doing entertainment in pubs. So you were a guest in one of the pubs that I was the entertainment in Fuerteventura, the Flower of Scotland.
Correct. It was my first holiday I went on with my now wife. At the time, she was my girlfriend. She bought an apartment in Fuerteventura, and we went out there to do it up and get it ready. And we were staying in this little hotel on Fuerteventura. And one night we wandered into this Scottish...
Staggered in.
We staggered out. We rolled into this... pub called the Flower of Scotland, which was Scottish themed and full of wonderful Scottish people. Actually,
with an English DJ,
and we did karaoke and play your cards right. And Nikki and I got sloshed in the Flower of Scotland every night for a week. And when you reached out to me, I said to Nikki, I said, I know this guy. Where do I know him from? I know this guy. I know the name. I know the face. And I pieced together some long lost history and when he was the bloody DJ from that pub in Fuerteventura that we went to on holiday 18 years ago. And actually, as I just mentioned to you as well, we went back to Fuerteventura for the first time about 2 years ago, and I took my kids to the Flower of Scotland.
Unbelievable. I mean, does that not show us how much of a small world it is sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm a great believer in that. Everything happens for a reason, and
Yes,
not
yeah,
all of it's good, and not all of it's bad.
yes.
And there is, and I think this is quite important actually. Because I used to struggle with this a little bit when I was younger, right? Which is if everything happens for a reason, and if there's karma, and if all of these things exist, what's the point in kind of making plans and preparing and being proactive about things? And I think the way I think about it is that if you are, to use an example, walking down a path, you're going to come to a crossroads. That crossroads is a result of walking down that path, and you're always going to hit that crossroads. But which fork in the road you choose to take, that's then up to you. And I think that there are, yes, everything happens for a reason, but you make your own luck.
Very true. When we say that everything happens for a reason, we decide what that reason is, and that's how we
Yes.
can turn every negative into a positive. And it doesn't feel like we can do that in that moment. And I get that. And I work with
Yep.
a lot of clients and businesses on that point is look, the negative stuff's always going to be there. It's how do we, it's kind of like the definition to me, the definition of a positive mindset is if it's raining tomorrow, I know I've got an umbrella because I can't take the rain away, but I can put my umbrella up and go, I'm good to carry on walking in the rain.
But you also know in 6 months' time it'll be sunny again. So
Absolutely.
it's not always easy to stay positive, but I think you can use, and the umbrella example is really good. Look, I can't stop the rain, but I can keep myself dry. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's important.
Yeah, it really is. So we only ever do like a 5-10 minute prep before the podcast starts, and I think that's that the best way for the podcast to happen is it's more organic. It's very much a flow kind of conversation, which I think that's when we get the real information out. And we've got a really fascinating a subject to talk about, which is always going to be clear to my heart. Now, I mentioned to you before, I worked at Royal Caribbean for 13 years, and to be fair, always got on with HR. Never really had a problem with HR. But there's often, as you spoke about before, which I'm going to let you completely open that subject up. There's often a negative connotation to some people's mindsets towards HR and HR's responsibility. And I think that we've got a perfect conversation to have today of what is the actual function of HR and what is the function of a good HR
Yeah,
and how it's extremely important for businesses.
it is important for businesses. When it's done well, it will be a support for the business. And I think the issue arises is that often the human resources function is a mouthpiece for decisions taken elsewhere by other people. And yes, look, there's that, everyone calls us the fun police and this, that, and the other. But the function is, and I think it's quite simple actually, that is, and it's twofold. The first, from the business perspective, is risk management. You are managing the internal customer, which is your employees,
Mhm.
and you are managing the risk. The second thing is on the employee side is we exist to ensure that every employee has the tools they need to be successful,
Yes.
or at least to try. And we're not always successful, but and I think that yes, there's policy, there's procedure, there's all of these things, but we live in the grey, and our job is to live in the grey and to see both sides of every coin. and then to advise on solutions. So it's but I think yes, because we tend to be the instrument, and not always, not always delivering happy messages, because businesses are businesses. That, but also I think the approach is important.
Approach is definitely important. So when you say we work in the grey, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm feeling that is possibly where you're saying you work in the emotional, possibly the heart-centered side, because policy is very, this is what we do,
Yeah,
this is what we follow, to make sure there's a clear guideline for everybody, to make sure that both employee
yeah,
and employer is completely and utterly protected if
yes,
we follow those systems.
yeah,
But the grey is the heart-centered approach of understanding. I know that we've got this policy here, but then the human part of it is, look, what else can we do? Is that
yes,
what you're saying when you say work in the grey?
absolutely. And it's. I think it's an interesting thing. And I think if you think of lawyers,
I try not
and
to.
yeah, me too as well. But if you think of what they do and what they have to achieve, if you're in a court of law, you have to have reasonable doubt, right? So there needs to be, if someone's been accused of something, for them to be acquitted, there must be reasonable doubt. Whereas from an HR, we're not lawyers. We don't want to be lawyers. We're not implementing the law. Yes, we have policies and we have procedures, because you need, and this has become a bit of a dirty word, if you like, but I'm discipline. And discipline doesn't mean disciplining people. It's not
No,
something that you do to somebody else. It is a framework within which we can all work and get along and do our jobs and be content at work. Because my old boss, my very first HR director, said to me, yes, you have to approach everything with empathy and compassion and see both sides. She said, but you cannot have people running around doing whatever they like.
correct.
So that's what I mean. Yes, with the grey, there's the piece that is empathetic and compassionate, and there's the piece that is humane.
Mm,
And for example, when you're presented with an allegation of something, it's important to be in possession of both sides of the story, all of the facts, any mitigation, because not everything's cut and dried, not everything's black and white, and that's what I mean about working in the grey.
yeah. So when you read in the world different people's opinions of like this thing, well, there is a perceived um, perspective of people saying, well, that HR is crippling businesses.
Yeah,
As a HR man, you know where I'm going with this one, right?
I
So
certainly do.
I wanted to set you up for this because this is going to be your monologue for the entire podcast that I will snip it up for you. And yeah, I can see you getting into position like, right, let's take the gloves off. Right, we're writing that right.
Yeah, limbering up.
So when there's that perceived perception that HR is killing businesses
Yeah.
and not helping businesses and allowing businesses to thrive, what would your perspective or your commentary on that be?
I suspect that, well, I don't suspect. I know, I suppose, like in every job, every role, every function, there are people who would do it well and there are people who do it not so well. And no doubt, many people have had, I was going to say run-ins. That's perhaps not the wrong expression, but
Experiences.
dealings with HR departments that are less than positive. And I think that comes from approach. I think that you can deliver a message with empathy and compassion, even if it's an unpleasant message, or not unpleasant, but something someone doesn't want to hear. And it can be as simple as, someone's requested holiday and the manager's denied it and they're upset. So they come to HR to complain. And I've, 1,000 times over, I've dealt with things like that, and often the a lot of what we get is that, actually, in my experience, it is people going, my manager has decided X and I don't agree, or I am aggrieved, or I'm unhappy because, and usually it's because, oh, I've already booked my flights. Well, okay, so there is a policy over here that says don't book your flights and don't do anything until your holiday's approved. That said, can we have a conversation with the manager? Can we understand why that holiday has not been approved? I mean, particularly in hospitality, right? If I've got a restaurant and I need 20 waiters to open the restaurant for breakfast, and I've got 22 waiters and I rotate them and I can have two away at the same time. So a third one comes along, but I wonder whether that conversation has been had. So, but I think it's also really important, and I had a leadership coach, well, I do have a leadership coach, a fine gentleman called Simon Thorpe, who's always been a bit of a shoulder to cry on, who once said to me, and I cling to this, he said, you should always be approachable, but you don't always have to be available.
That is absolutely correct. Yes.
So as an HR director, I would always say to everybody, if I will talk to anybody, and I know it's a cliche, but my door is open. And I think that's another thing we need to do as an HR function. Doors open, transparent, consistent, fair in everything that we do. And I think that's actually important. I think if you do those three things, you will become an asset to your business. And I think sometimes one of those will drop, which is what gives people a negative idea of what HR do. You need to be transparent. You need to work in the open. Yes, we have confidentialities and privacies that we need to maintain, and that's also important. But we work, we're not hidden behind some locked door somewhere. We're fair, right? If we say that to that person, then we say the same thing to that person. And I think, again, there's a perception of sometimes people being treated differently. Usually, but on the flip side of that, there's usually a reason for it. There's mitigation. There is something in this scenario that is different to something in this scenario, even though they may look the same on the surface, which leads to perhaps a different outcome. And consistent. You do the same things every day, because you mentioned culture and you touched on culture. And can I share a bugbear with you?
Please do.
I'll share a couple. This, what do you want to call it? Procession towards HR functions being rebranded as people and culture. I detest it. I get it and I understand it. I don't detest it. That's wrong. I understand. My observation is that by calling this department people and culture, you make one group of people responsible for a business's culture. And that's not what we're there to do. We are not responsible for the culture. We don't create the culture. We're part of it. We protect it. But culture comes from the very top. And culture is quite simply how leaders behave every single day. That's where the culture comes from. And if they're fair and transparent and consistent and open and approachable, and again, not always available, but approachable, and they listen, then you can build culture. But if you say, hey, you guys over there, you're responsible for culture, we've got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. But I think that's also, we're sometimes the architects of our own downfall. And I think perhaps HR needs better PR. But I think sometimes there are scenarios where, it can be a bit kind of, I suppose, if you run around acting like, I don't know what to call it, like MI6, KGB, whatever you want to call it, and I think there is a danger of the HR function being perceived as kind of almost like spies for the owners or for the leaders or the board or whatever it may be. And we do have a part to play in that relationship. But if it's balanced and if it's done in the open, we are making X decision and these are the reasons, then it can be a tremendous asset to a business. But we're the guardians of the culture, not the creators of it.
That's extreme. That's really powerful to be able to say that we're the guardians of the culture, but not the creators of the culture.
Yeah,
And it's funny because there's now a lot of statistics that prove that the biggest investment and the returning investment for businesses is by getting the culture right. And getting the culture right means making changes because it does start at the top. And I always remember the fish rots from the head up. It's a really powerful sentiment to understand that if you get the top structure right, the rest of it becomes easy.
yes,
So especially in hospitality, because hospitality is an extremely high stress environment from the pressure that the cooks are under, from the employees, the waiters, and the staff and the servers going out there and wanting to deliver the best experience possible. And I come from Royal Caribbean, so I
yeah,
know what high pressure is because we
yeah,
did 13 years at Royal Caribbean. And I do believe that Royal Caribbean got that balance really, really well. But the two people that made the biggest impact on that, which was the captain
yeah,
and the hotel director. They were the
yeah,
two. Captain was in charge of the marine. Hotel director was in charge of the public facing part of the things. And we always knew and understood that if you had a fantastic captain and a fantastic hotel director in the right positions, the rest of your ship was going to was just going to fall into place.
yes,
And if we had those the leaders in that place where they didn't particularly listen, because it's not always about listening, it's about helping people feel heard.
yes.
And
And
there's a
and they're
difference
and they're
between
and they're
listening.
slightly different things, aren't they?
They are completely different. And I do a training on businesses on helping
Yeah.
people feel heard. And a lot of the times you just have to listen to the right things. You don't
Yes.
actually have to, not everyone that comes to you with a grievance or an issue is going to be correct. They're going to be an
Yeah.
emotional, disempowered place, which is going to make them feel a certain way. But helping somebody feel heard in that moment will then help them feel valued.
Yes. Even
Now,
if they don't get the answer they're looking for.
yeah, and I'll use the perfect example, and I'm going to be getting on a podcast shortly. Is one of my old leaders from Royal Caribbean, Darren Budden. He was exceptionally good of allowing me and other people to feel heard and valued, and then still making a completely different decision that we weren't going to like. But none of us complained about it. It was like, yeah, I
Yeah.
feel heard. At least you've heard my point of view. That's the decision to be made. And he said that he took that from an old American general. I've forgotten the name of the general. He was in charge of the army through the Iraq War.
Colin
And
Powell.
Colin Powell, he said, look, I took this thing from Colin Powell, Cuddy, which was let everybody have a point of view, let everyone speak, and then all agree this is the decision we're making. And I know it's
Yeah.
going to go against half of the people in there, but this is the decision I've made.
Yeah.
And he nailed it every time. He
Yeah.
genuinely nailed it every time. And that's
Because
fascinating.
I think it is, and because I'm looking for a new role at the moment, I've taken a little break and had the summer off, went away, which was nice, and now I'm looking for my next thing. And I'm talking to first and foremost, I'm connecting with people.
Connection. Yep.
Connecting with people. I'm talking to people. I'm reaching out to people like you and I have done, recruiters, professionals, people I know, people I don't know, to say, hey, look, I'm looking for my next adventure. This is my experience, and I've been asked dozens of times by recruiters, what are you looking for? What are you looking for in a job? What do you want? What do you want to get out of it? And I think sometimes it's more practical, but my answer is because I think you have to be open to what's out there and what might come, right? Yes, my experience is in hospitality. I think the skills are very transferable. So I'm exploring a whole bunch of other stuff. But my response to recruiters when they're asking me what I look for in a job is that it is important to me that wherever I go next, that the HR function has a voice.
Mm.
And when I say that, I mean that we have the opportunity to advise those above, peers to the side, managers below, whatever it may be. We have the opportunity to speak. And my old MD, Mr. Marley, did this really, really well. And he would say, look, this is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? And I would give him my thoughts. Sometimes it was my opinion. Often it was alternative solutions. But occasionally he would say, Simon, I don't care. I want it done. I hear you, but I want it done like this. And I just got on with it. And it was great. And I didn't sulk. And I don't, look, because the other thing about the HR function, and I think sometimes people, HR professionals can get this wrong. So you take a hotel, I've got a food and beverage department, I've got a rooms division, which is housekeeping, reception, I've got engineers, I've got finance, I've got sales, marketing, PR, I've got spa, I've got all these different functions. I think we had 30 different
Yep.
departments because individual restaurants sit under
Yep.
their own thing. Each of those departments had a head of department, had a manager, a restaurant manager, engineering manager, PR manager, whatever it may be. It is not my job at all, in any way, shape, or form, to manage their teams for them.
Correct.
It is their job.
Yes.
My job is to make sure that as managers, they have the tools, the knowledge that they need to do that job.
Correct.
And sometimes that means going, no, 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 you are wrong. You are wrong and you will not do that. But oftentimes, particularly when it gets strenuous, if you're, I've sat with many managers doing their first disciplinary and it's always quite nerve-wracking. But look, I think all of it boils down to just remember to treat people like people. And what do people want? They want to be heard. And that's all. It's very simple. And yeah, it is actually very, very simple because, as I mentioned to you earlier, in my head, particularly in kind of customer facing businesses, the equation is very, very simple. Happy employees equals great service equals happy customers equals revenue. Word of mouth, reputation, repeat business, all of those things are tied up in that. But it's a very simple equation. And look, sometimes happy, creating happy teams means cutting out some of the dead flesh. Sometimes it means moving things around. But it's about striking that balance between what does the business need and what is the best way to achieve that with my human resources.
Fantastic. And I think it's definitely a really important part now is I don't want to overgeneralize. I really don't want to overgeneralize, but it would feel sometimes that people are not as happy as they used to be.
I think that the world of work is changing at a pace we've never seen before.
Correct.
From, remote hybrid working, COVID moved the goalposts, and not just a little bit. They picked them up and chucked them into the arena next door. And
So
we're
it,
still recovering, and
uh,
we're not recovering. Recovering's wrong. We're still deciding where we are. We still haven't quite figured that out yet, I think.
so I always try and highlight the reason hybrid working became such a problem because through COVID, there was we need to be separated.
Yes.
And people that alleviated the fears. But once that fear had gone away, then you need to start driving community again. But unfortunately, the way that the brain works is we still have a fear implanted in us that being around other people could cause something. But that's created a massive part of the happiness chemicals that we can create internally through the brain is being connected. And
Yes.
that big area of disconnection within the workplace has started to take its toll. And people are wanting face to face. They're
Yeah.
wanting to be around other people because they've realized that within that connection, then we have a really powerful, it creates oxytocin when we're around other people. Because it's called the cuddle chemical, not the cuddy chemical, the cuddle
So
chemical.
that's a different thing.
And that is completely different. That joke from a HR manager. I love it. You're hired straight away. He has got a sense of humor.
You know, I am not the typical HR professional. I'm a bit left field. A couple of years ago, was interviewing someone for a very senior role, for a director position, and she and I had a very interesting chat. And I kind of like to sort of lay it out on the table, warts and all, when I'm interviewing someone, particularly for something senior, because you've got to come into this with your eyes open. I'm going to tell you what's on fire and needs putting out, what's broken and needs fixing, what's well oiled and is going well. So we kind of do a bit of a sort of warts and all, are you still interested kind of conversation. And at the end, we were together for about an hour. And she kind of put her head on one side and she looked at me and she went, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Yeah." She went, "How are you allowed to work in HR?"
But that's authenticity.
Yes,
That's the realness.
yes.
We need more realness and like so it's funny because somebody said to me the other day, Cuddy, I've got quite a few businesses that I would like to recommend you to, but I'm not really sure that they would like your hair, the way that you talk, or your I always wear neon bright shirts. And they went, that's not really the business. I'm like, trust me, what I do works. If they don't like me, guess what? It's not going to work. They're not my clients. They're never
Yeah,
going to want. But if you're wanting a training within a business structure that actually helps people understand, learn, and make changes on a really simple concept, you will genuinely get the biggest amount of value from training with Cuddy. And the amount of people that always walk away and go, "Oh my God, I'm just so fed up with that corporate. Oh, oh, I've just got another training to go through." Nobody ever walks away from a training like, "Oh," and in fact, that the biggest common thing is, "Oh, can we get Cuddy in for the other trainings that we've got to
yeah.
do as well?" Because of that authenticity, and it's based around the courage to be disliked, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Absolutely. And as that's, I love the fact that you've touched on that because both personally and professionally, I'm at peace with the fact that I'm Marmite.
Yeah,
No one will ever say, "Yeah, he's all right."
yeah,
They'll either say, "Wow, he's amazing, he's great, he's the best HR person I've ever worked with," da 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 da. Or they'll say, "No, he's a dickhead and can't stand him," and that's fine
yes,
because I'm it's a I think it's a balance, right? Isn't it? I'm not. I would like to be liked. It's
it's nice
nice.
to be liked. Of course, it's nice to be
It's
liked.
nice to be liked. It's nice for people to go, "Wow, you're great." You know, one of the best compliments anyone's ever paid me, actually. So when I was in a previous role, we hired a graduate into our HR team, fresh out of her hospitality management degree at Bournemouth University.
So technically, they didn't know anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. But it's actually a really great program. It's a really great program. It's a 4-year program, and they send them out for a year to work in a hotel. Go and actually figure this out. Anyway, but she joined us, and she was great, and she was open, and she listened, and she picked things up really quickly. And when I left, and she had a couple of promotions, but when I left that job, my number two took my job and she took the number two job. And then when that person left, she took that role. And she's recently left after being there for goodness, about 8 years. And she said to me, and I think you'll like this, Cuddy. She said to me, she said, you taught me the best thing anyone's ever taught me. And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing. What's that?" And she said, "The power of silence. You ask somebody a question, you let them answer, and then you just say nothing." And I'm particularly talking about if you're doing, you know, practically an investigation, a disciplinary, a grievance, that sort of thing. The power of silence. But also when you're talking to someone, you know, I've dealt with people who have come to me over the years with allegations of rape and sexual assault,
Yeah.
miscarriages, people who have lost partners and parents and children, and it's emotionally draining because you absorb some of it.
As an
You
empath,
you
we
can't
do.
carry it for them, and
No.
you can take on a little bit of the burden just by being. You know when they say if you're going to the doctor to get a difficult diagnosis, to take somebody with you because you're that person who is not invested emotionally in that situation
We'll
can
listen.
listen
They'll
to
listen
what's
more.
being said and will remember more. It's that kind of thing as well. And we need to be that too.
Yeah.
We need to be, and one of the things I loved about my last job was that anybody could come and talk to me about anything.
Yeah.
And they felt like they could, from commie chefs and junior bartenders through to
Yeah.
directors of events and sales and all the rest of it. And usually it was to do with something they were struggling with at work, but sometimes it was I dealt with a situation with an employee who reacted to something in a certain way that wasn't particularly helpful, and then kind of refused to tell their manager why, and it kind of became this thing, and the manager came to see me and said she's got to go and this, that, and the other. I said, fine, leave it with me, let me have a chat. And look, I won't go into too much detail, but it was to do with triggers, some subconscious in some ways,
Yes.
deeply buried triggers following childhood
Trauma.
sexual trauma.
Yeah.
And that's the point where a great HR professional will go, whoa, okay, shut the door, sit down. What can we do? You can't, and I'm not saying you forgive all evils, because there's all evils. That's the wrong word. But you forgive misdemeanors, misconduct, because there's a reason. But what you can do is you can help that person. How can I help you? Because you can't respond like that. You cannot react in the middle of a restaurant and have that sort of explosion in front of guests. It's unhelpful. It's unprofessional. But I know what the triggers are now, which I didn't know before. So what do you need? How can I help you? How can we help you? Can I talk to your manager about it? Can I, do we need to get occupational health involved here? Do we need to set up some counselling for you? And the very simple question, which I think a lot of us forget, but I used to ask all the time, is how are you? How are things at home? Because if I've learned anything, is that people who have challenging home lives, and it could be for a million reasons. They're worried about money. Their spouse is ill. Their parent is ill. And anyone who says, and this is a particular pet hate of mine, managers who say, oh, when you should leave your personal stuff at the door when you come to work.
No.
Bull. Sorry, it's bull. Because we're people, we're humans, we carry it with us.
Yeah.
So
And
how can we help you, given all the baggage that we all carry, all different, to be the best you can be?
that is 100%. That's the business. And to be fair, that's the businesses that I work with.
Yeah,
So a lot of there's, because I'm up in Scotland, Simon. I forgot to tell you, but I'm actually up in Scotland. I live in
yeah,
Scotland now, strangely enough. Yeah, strangely enough now I do live in Scotland. Because that's where my wife was from.
right on.
And the businesses that we work with are fully understanding of, in that moment, that reaction, there's a something behind it. And most people's problems, they're bringing their home life to work. And a lot of the times people think work is that place to be able to offload all that stuff.
Yeah,
And that's where the mindsets and the performances do start taking a dip. So that old adage of don't bring your personal life to your work life. Well, no, that's the thing we do. And that's where the mind management coaching that we have with the businesses we've been doing is, because we're not counselors and we're not therapists. We help them understand the behavior, we help reset the trauma, and then we start helping people go, oh, thank you so much for the support.
Yeah.
And what's happening with the staff, the leaders, and the employees that we're working with, they go back to the owner of the business and go, look, thank you so much for that. Genuinely, thank you so much for that. And there's kind of a similar thing that's happened. Somebody did say to me, Cuddy, you should really do that as a business. Is we started helping some employees work on their confidence so that they had the confidence to leave the business. But within the business that they've been working with, they'd been underperformers. But once they realized they had confidence, they were like, oh, now I can go and do anything we want. So they actually left the business. So a lot
Yeah.
of the businesses that we're working with were like, we've got some more underperformers. Could you, that we maybe can you work on their confidence as well? Then they started re-employing the people that they wanted in the business structure, and it was something that we worked on with. I'm like, are you happy to do this? And, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that'll really help us. Let's get them the confidence to leave. And I was like, oh my God, how unbelievable that. The employers weren't coming to us and saying, oh, well, I've spent all this money. They've now got the confidence in the left. Is what was the point of that? It's like, no, we really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Funny, isn't it? Yeah, look, businesses evolve, don't they?
Yeah.
And they become different beasts over time, sometimes without even noticing. You know, you grow a little bit and things and yeah, look, in a post-COVID world, you mentioned happiness earlier, which perhaps I don't think I answered that question well enough. I mean, I wouldn't say people are less happy. I think people's priorities have shifted.
Yeah.
I think that now younger people coming into the workforce um, have a different agenda to when we went to work and when our parents went to work. It's changed beyond measure, and I think, and I think some of it is really positive, and and you know, change is good, right? If it's managed well,
Yeah.
it can be a good thing. It's not, listen, like anything, it's not all positive. It's not all helpful. Some of it is a little bit. I was going to say destructive, but that's the wrong word. Some of it gives imbalance. It's that you lack certainty and surety. But you know, it's happened a few times where you know someone in their early 20s who has worked at the hotel has given their, you know, we think they're great, we see a career for them, and they resign. And I always used to like to have a chat, and the number of times um, I'd say, look, why are you leaving? And they'd go, yeah, I just fancy doing something else. I said, okay, so what are you going to do? Oh, well, nothing yet. I'm going to take a break. And I'm like, that, what? You're going to take a break? You're going to and not because, listen, you feel you need to take a break, take a break. That's what I'm doing at the moment. But I've worked solidly for 25 years, so I think I'm entitled to a couple of months off. But it's like, but I mean, how do you live? If I planned for this break, so I know what my parameters are. But when I was 20, if I didn't work, I didn't eat, I didn't pay the rent, and I didn't do all of these things. And again, there's been so much actually this week on in the news and on the radio about um, the number of people who still live at home with their parents in their 30s and 40s and have no intention of moving out because they can't afford it. You know, there was some research done recently, I think it was by the charity Springboard, but I'm not sure, that said any hospitality business is built on those frontline workers.
It is. Absolutely. They're
It's
they're
built,
the,
it
they're the
is
ones that's
built
creating the
on
ambience.
waiters, without, if I haven't got housekeeping, I've got no hotel. If I can't sell clean bedrooms, there's no business. If I can't clear tables and serve breakfast, chefs, waiters, all these things, okay? And these are relatively low paid jobs mostly. Listen, we've come on leaps and bounds. And again, if I look at COVID and think of silver linings for the hospitality industry, it accelerated something that was already coming, which was if we're going to survive as an industry, we can no longer be seen as low skilled, low paid, terrible hours, and all of these things
Mm.
because you know people just won't stand for it anymore. But I think we're built on those frontline workers. And a piece of research I recall came out recently was along the lines of, if the cost of living continues to increase the way it has done over the last 5 or 6 years, those workers will simply will not be able to afford to live within commutable distance of central London.
Yes.
And
That's
that's
shocking.
terrifying.
That is
And
terrifying.
the way things change so fast, we don't always think of the knock-on effect. I had a fascinating conversation with somebody over dinner on Saturday who owns a nightclub, an event venue, da 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 da. And he's part of a committee that meet once a year to sort of talk about all this stuff. And somebody raised the issue of the impact of weight loss jabs on the hospitality industry. Which I'd not
People are
thought
not
of.
eating as much.
And they're not eating as much. Because of the nature of these things, it essentially suppresses your appetite. But the conversation came up because he was talking to someone who was on one of these weight loss jabs, who basically turned around and went, yeah, when I go out to eat now, I get a starter. Where I used to get starter, main, dessert, da 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 da. I'd also have a few drinks, but now, because I'm not eating much, I get drunk more quickly. So I only have 2 drinks. So when I'm going out, I'm spending 30 quid instead of 100 quid. And suddenly the hospitality industry is going, just a minute, 7% apparently of the population are on these jabs, which I find to be quite a high number. I'm not
Oh, I think
entirely
that's a low number.
really.
If obesity is so high and they're becoming readily available,
Yeah,
and knowing that I'm on a fat jab, because
yeah,
as great as I am at managing my mind, there at 8 o'clock at night time, I'm like, right, what can I eat?
yeah,
So I'm having to manage that. And I mean, they do work. They genuinely
yeah,
do work.
yeah,
And I'm just thinking last time I went out, and I did say the next time I come back, I'll just get the starters because it was
yeah,
enough. It was
yeah.
enough.
And I think suddenly, and not just hospitality, food retail as well. Cash and carry and supermarkets. This is going to crop up in supermarkets soon, where they're going to go, hold on a sec, the sales are down, and it's because, yeah, these anyway. The point is that change is constant, I think,
The
and
only constant in life is change.
yeah,
Yes.
change is constant, and how that change is managed is the most important thing. And we're not perfect, and we're not always going to think of everything. But from an HR perspective, business change is always constant as well.
Yeah.
Um, particularly in hotels and hospitality where margins are tight.
Yes, I know that they are in certain areas. I work at a cat. Well, it's not really a spoons at the weekend. It's food, and then they do the entertainment at the night time, which is obviously what I do. And he's told me how the margins are really tough
Yeah,
and things like that. So yeah, we are definitely, but we are focusing on, and I always say, look, use my experience of what I've done at Royal Caribbean. I can show you staff how to genuinely just make a difference. And they've noticed that their tips have started going higher. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's a key indicator of your service.
yeah.
So if you get your tips up, you'll be happier. And then you'll also realize there is a point of smiling when you don't possibly want to smile.
Absolutely. And listen, and it's always the what's in it for me argument. What's in it for me is always going to help. Better service equals better service charge, and that's good for them and it's good for us. But it's I tell you something that I believe and I think is widely accepted is that if you go out to a restaurant, Cuddy, and the food is fine, but the service is amazing, you'll probably go back there. Even if the food's it's
People buy how they were made to feel.
fine. But if you
Yes.
go to a restaurant and the food is unbelievable, the food's great, it's the best meal you've ever had, but the service was crap, miserable, slow, this, that, and the other, you're going to
We
more likely to go back to the first one. than
To
you
be
are hotel.
fair, we just went on a cruise with P&O, and the service was absolutely shite from start to finish. The food was out of this world,
Yeah.
and we have openly said we probably wouldn't go back because we just it's the small touches of the service that you're looking for to feel valued. Again, it comes back to value.
It's always and this is I think the mistake people make is it's not about cost, it is about value. You've hit the nail on the head. It
What
doesn't
was
matter how
value?
much something costs. Is it worth it? Is it worth the price? I used to do a talk to hospitality students a couple of times a year at different universities. And one of my first slides that I always used to put up is thinking about the hotel industry is what is it that we do? And it's a question that stumps people. Yeah, beds, food, the whole thing. We create experiences.
It's experiences,
That's
it's
it's
moments,
all
it's
about.
memories.
It's memories, it's experiential, and everybody wants to feel like the most important person in the room.
You're paying for that
Of
experience.
course, you're paying for that experience. But why would I stay in a five-star hotel for £1,000 a night when I could stay at Holiday Inn for 200 quid a night round the corner? And don't get me wrong, I actually love Holiday Inns. Of the whole budget hotel world, they're the best. Anyway, and it's about value. It's about, was it worth it? Listen, you can go to, I don't know, God, showing my age here, WH Smith, and get a Bic biro probably for £1 or 2 quid. Or you could go to Bond Street and go to Mont Blanc and buy a biro for 500 quid. They both write. You still write with them. You're not going to
I'd
write,
still rather take the big.
would you? But yeah, point taken. But why do people do that? What is it about that? And I think part of it has become a lot more about brand. And you talk about how things have changed and whether people are happy. Again, speaking to someone who I know very well, who has a venue that relies on young people having a lot to drink. And he says there's two things that have shifted in the last 10 years. He said the first thing is, and his demographic is 18 to 24, right? First and foremost, people are ostensibly drinking less because everything's being filmed.
Yes.
You get off your face, Cuddy, and throw up in a bin on the high street. Someone's filming you, and someone's going to put it on the internet, and there's going to be a viral hashtag. Cuddy goes or whatever it may be, right? And everyone will see it. They're terrified. You and I, when we were growing up and showing our age, we got up to all sorts of stuff, and none of it's recorded anywhere, and thank God for that.
Yeah, for a lot of the stuff that I did, yes.
Yeah, yeah. But the second thing is brand awareness. You and I, when we were 20, if we went into a pub, we'd say, I'll have a vodka and tonic, or a vodka and lemonade, or pint, or whatever it may be, pint of lager. Now, 20-year-olds are going into bars going, I would like a Tanqueray and Fever Tree.
Correct.
Brand association. And it's that luxury piece. There are two in the accommodation, hotel, hospitality world, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, that in the next 10 years, there are only two types of businesses that will be successful. Your top end, five-star hotel, £1,000 a night, because there's still more than enough people who are prepared to pay that. And then the budget end of the market is going to show and is going to explode. So affordable luxury. And I suppose, like with anything, it's the middle that always gets squeezed. When there's a recession, your Pradas and your Gucci's are bulletproof, right? They're fine. And your Poundlands and your Lidls and your Aldis suddenly see a boom in their business. It's Marks and Spencer's that always suffers.
It's a shame because we like Marks and Spencer.
We like Marks and Spencer's. We do. We do. Anyway, I think perhaps we've slightly moved on, but I think the point is, from an HR perspective, and to perhaps bring some legitimacy to this conversation is that, and I'm a great believer in this actually, is that everything is about balance. And we've talked about that. We've talked
Yeah.
about balance. We've talked about change. You know, my 20-year-old management trainee has got entirely different expectations to my 55-year-old electrician. What they look for in an employer, what they want. So, how do we, and that's the other part of it, you know, and we talk about all these things, all these corporate names like compensation and benefits and reward and recognition and all this sort of stuff, which I might add, recognition is top of my list as the most important thing.
Always recognition.
Always about
How do
recognition.
you make someone feel?
And I think as well, sometimes what people get wrong is you turn recognition into this big song and dance. And it's nice, you know, we have our annual awards and our employee of the month and all that kind of jazz. But do you know what people want, Cuddy? They want their manager to take them down to the local spoons, buy them a couple of pints, pat them on the back and say, thank you very much.
Thank you. Cost nothing.
Costs an hour and 10 quid. That's what they want. Take your team out and, you know, and it's not going to change their lives, but it's not reward. Reward is different. Reward is pay increases, bonuses,
It's compensation.
commissions.
Reward is different than
That.
a thank you.
So
Yes.
that's that comp and bend thing. And we talk about reward and recognition. I think they're separate things, but recognition is key. And recognition should happen every day. You've done a great job. Thank you very much. That's amazing. And the other thing as well, which is key, and this comes back to culture. Now, there's something I don't get, which is, and I've seen it several times, managers who kind of take credit for other people's work. In my opinion, if my team do amazing stuff and do great work, I want to shout about that and say they did it because they're great because I'm managing them, because they've learned from the best.
True.
But I'm not going to go, hey, look what I did. And some people do, and it baffles me. Again, we're kind of scattergunning.
It's not a
here.
baffle. It comes down to insecurity and emotional needs. Some
Yes,
people
it
need
does.
more validation than others. So you definitely you want to be looking at the Maroslav's emotional hierarchy. And the managers that are in that position where they need that validation for that they're creating a sense of this is the reason I'm doing the job. Because management's a hard job.
Yes,
To be fair, the manager is reporting to the leaders, and the employees are going to take a lot of that. So management sometimes is thankless if it's not done correctly or appropriately. Because I
yes,
remember being in a place where I was an atrocious manager. I got spanked, and I had to learn how to become a good manager because then I could
yes,
go into that leadership role.
yes,
And it was that insecurity and ego within myself that had said, you need praise for what they're doing. When actually all you need to do is give them more praise, and then guess what? It comes back. But always put
yeah,
it out first before we get
yeah,
it back. And I am really conscious of time, but this has been a fascinating podcast on genuinely who is responsible for culture. You are the guardians of it, not the keepers of it. I think that's fantastic. We are now really deep diving on what employees actually really want, and how to make happier employees is going to be the biggest cost and return on investment for anyone's business structure. And I believe that the bigger businesses in the world are completely understanding that. I know Royal Caribbean understand that. I know that large banking companies generally understand that. And the larger businesses that are growing are understanding, which is why I call myself the chief officer of happiness consultant for businesses, because there's some simple things that people can change within that business structure
yeah,
to actually create more happiness. And it does, but holding them accountable at the same time is a really powerful thing, because you can have those horrible conversations with people saying, look, you might be going through something and we need to know what you're going through so that we can stop that happening,
yeah,
because that can't happen on our watch.
yeah.
What do we need to support you with here? And
And that, if you don't mind me interrupting for 1 sec, that is what managing performance is.
absolutely,
That
it's
is
about having those
every
conversations.
interaction you have with someone who works for you you are managing their performance.
Yes.
You know, and it's praise or it's, you know, constructive criticism or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And look, and sometimes you hire people and it doesn't work out. You're not happy, they're not happy, whatever. Or you know, often you recruit someone who you feel is ready to take the next step, and it does quite look. All of these things, the honesty, the transparency, the consistency is key. But managers used to come to my office, and this was the thing that used to make my blood boil. I will finish with this. They we at my last job, so there would be a 6 month probation period,
Yeah.
and they'd come in 5 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days into the probation period and go, "Yeah, it's not working out." To me, about somebody else, and my first response is, "Sit down, shut the door." And I would say, before we have this conversation about this individual and their performance, I want you to tell me everything you have done to support them and train them and to make sure they succeed. Because I am not going to sign off on failing someone's probation if you haven't done everything in your power to make them successful.
And that's their role.
That's your job. And I'm certainly not here to go, "Oh, okay, fine, we'll do a probation review tomorrow and we'll get rid." No,
No,
because that's
there's
how.
been no paperwork.
Yeah,
There's no
it's
trail.
retention. Do you know? Can I tell you one other thing? I went to a job interview a couple of weeks ago. I will not say who with, and it was really odd because it was with the HR function reported into the operations director. It was all a bit of an odd setup, but I went anyway because it was an interesting business. And I was having this conversation with the hiring manager, shall we say, and we were talking about, I think it was payroll or something. And I said, "Oh, well, what I would do in that situation is this." I said, "Look, because actually it makes my life easier and then that makes everyone else's life easier." And she went, "Well, we don't just do things to keep HR happy." And I thought, I know that. Wish more people did. But we're happy. We support one another as HR professionals. We absorb all of whatever needs to be absorbed, and we don't always have an outlet for ourselves. So yeah, we support each other, and I think it's a good thing to do. But the world is changing, and I think the next few years are going to be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Mind Management Mentors podcast. I always love having conversations with HR because I think we start opening up the space for people to genuinely understand what's happening in that HR space. And it also gives businesses and other people to realize that there's always something going on behind that behavior,
Yeah.
which we've deep dived in this podcast. Thank you so much. Big love from Cuddy as always for being on, Simon. Much appreciated. I feel this is going to be a way for us to stay connected more moving forward. And to anyone watching this podcast, this is genuinely all about helping businesses understand the importance of mind management and understanding the importance of the support and understanding there's always something behind the behavior. If you can see the behavior and the outbursts here, there's something here that's going on. And mind management helps work on this so that the behavior goes away if the choices are wanting by that person. And that's what we do. And I'm a big believer. If you're enjoying this podcast, like and subscribe and share. We're coming up to 34,000, nearly 35,000 subscribers on the podcast. And if it's in the mind, it can be managed. And as always, big love from Cuddy, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast.
Many thanks.